What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This here is Legitical Response. I cover political news now. Folks, I got to tell you right from the jump, I've got a very involved video coming today. I'm not even sure if I'm going to get all the way through this thing in the time slot that's allotted for me, right? Like, I can go as long as I want to, but of course I try to keep it short and sweet and give you the news as it is coming in, and try to keep it enough to where I can keep your attention here long enough to where you get the entire story, because there's always stuff that they throw at the end of these things that's just absolutely mind-blowing. The facts that they leave out, or they'll push all the way to the end thinking that most readers aren't going to read all the way through, because, you know, this day and age, people's attention spans are just almost non-existent in some people. Some people can sit there and pay attention, but some people can't. So I try to keep it concise and to the point. So this one's long, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get through it, because there's so much subject matter here to cover, that and so many points that I need to get across, that I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it in 30 minutes, in 40 minutes. You know what I'm saying? So buckle up if you want to be here for the long ride. Let's stay here for the long ride. Now, let's get into it right quick. This is some outright insanity, y'all. This is just mind-blowing what's coming out of Minnesota. And this is something that's happening all over the damn country. And this isn't some crazy conspiracy theory, right? This is absolute fact. And what they're trying to do to our students is insane. I've told you guys that the communist movement is pushing forward step by step by step. And as conservatives, we generally sit back and we're tolerant people, right? You know, the left likes to talk about, oh, they're the tolerant ones. No, they're not. You know, they're non-tolerant of anybody outside their cult. Right? Anybody on the other side, they don't tolerate whatsoever. So, yeah, they're not tolerant, but we are. We allow for drag parades to go on. You know, we allow all this garbage to come into our schools. We allow for gay marriage and all this other stuff, which I don't have a problem with. I'm just saying, as conservatives, and historically speaking, they have allowed for these things. We've said, okay, we'll give in. Abortions, that's another good one, right? Like the ability for somebody to kill their kid. But, you know, that's outside the topic. Let's get into the story before I rant on for too long, because I could probably go on an entire 20-minute rant about what I was just talking about. But let's get into it right quick. Under Tim Walz, Minnesota banned Christians from teaching in public schools. Now, that is a blaring title, right? That's a reach out and grab your attention right fast. It's not an outright ban. It's kind of an effective ban. But it is a ban nevertheless, and it's insane. Let's get into it. Effective July 2025, teacher licensing rules passed last year in Minnesota under Democratic Governor Tim Walz will ban practicing Christians, Jews, and Muslims from teaching in public schools. We'll get into that. That's quite insane statement to make, right? Walz is now the presidential running mate of current U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. His resume includes a stint as a high school social studies teacher who sponsored a student queer sex club in 1999 in a freaking high school. Right now, I am on the cusp of millennial, right? I'm kind of what they call an exennial, right? I'm right there. I'm the first year of the millennials, and I was born in April, so I'm you know, I blend between Gen X and millennial, of course. Now, I always identify, right, if you want to go there, I identify as a Gen X because my parents were much older. The parents that raised me, at least, were much older than me. They were actually 40 when I was born. So I identify as a Gen X because my parents, you know, I would have been, you know, blah, blah, blah. You get it, right? Now, when I hear queer sex club in high school, that turns my damn stomach. Why are they allowing for this in the first freaking place? That's insane. Now, I understand that's might be a little bit of a out of touch take on that, I guess you could say, but nevertheless, I understand that queer means something different these days, but even still, queer sex club, that's just insane. So keep that in mind, because that's going to set the tone for the rest of this video. Starting next July, Minnesota agencies controlled by Tim Walz appointees will require teacher license applicants to affirm transgenderism and race Marxism. That's not a lie. That is just straightforward the truth. Facts, y'all. Without a teaching license, individuals cannot work in Minnesota public schools nor in the private schools that require such licenses. The latest version of the regulations requires teachers to affirm students' gender identity and sexual orientation to receive a Minnesota teaching license. That's outright insane. What does that have to do with basic learning? Math, arithmetic, English, you get it. What does any of those things have to do with any of that? Nothing whatsoever. So why are they focusing in on this garbage? Because that's what it is, garbage. Now here's an excerpt from this book, or whatever the hell it is, this regulations, the law, I guess, is what it is. The teacher fosters an environment that ensures student identities such as race, ethnicity, national origin, language, sex and gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, physical, developmental, emotional ability, socioeconomic class, and religious beliefs are historically and socially contextualized, affirmed, and incorporated into a learning environment where students are empowered to learn and contribute as their whole selves. What? Yeah, that's a word salad of a bunch of garbage. This is just insanity, right? Like when you read that, read it maybe a couple times to completely comprehend exactly what they're saying here. Yes, obviously, but what the hell does the sex and gender identity, and sexual orientation have to do with any of this, right? And then they sneak in the socioeconomic class. What does somebody's class have to do with learning? Nothing, right? You can have some rich kid learning just as hell as some kid that's homeless kid, right? They can both learn at the exact same time from the exact same curriculum, and none of what I just mentioned has anything to do with their ability to learn. It's insane. Why are they adding all this garbage to brainwash these kids? And that's what it is, and we'll get into that. It's brainwashing these kids into thinking a certain direction. This is a cult. This is a gender identity and sexually orientated cult. I had to use that specifically because that's what it is. This is a religion. This is their religion. And they are kicking out traditional theist religions. As a matter of fact, that's what they're doing because these religions don't believe in this garbage. And that's what they're trying to eliminate. And they're saying, oh, well, it's secular. This isn't secular, folks. This is a religion outright. Because if you deny their religion, they get pissed off. Just like if you go up to somebody and say something mean about God or something like that, right? Which I'm not going to because, once again, I identify as a Christian. I don't identify with any religion outright, but I believe in God, and I believe that the Bible itself was written by man. It's not necessarily the Word of God. It's man's interpretation, so it's fallible at the very least, right? But it's basic instructions before leaving Earth. It's a good rule book as to live by. There's many stories, blah, blah, blah. You get it. That's what I believe. I also understand secularism, and I understand that this Marxist garbage isn't that. This is a religion. AKA, it's a non-theist religion or a cult. Last spring, administrative law judges finally approved these pending changes to the Federalist reported 1 month before they were finalized. Universities are also affected starting in 2025. They must either train their teaching students to fulfill these anti-Christian requirements or be banned from offering state licensing, and thus the ticket to the vast majority of teaching jobs to their students. Since 2020 in Minnesota, teachers renewing their licenses, which is usually required every 5 to 7 years, must demonstrate cultural competency similar to the requirements imposed in 2025 on new teaching licenses. Teachers renewing their license must show evidence of self-reflection and discussion of topics that include gender identity, including transgender students, and sexual orientation. Now, I can understand this to a degree for college. maybe even high school. You might have an argument for high school, but anything below the 9th grade, no. I'm sorry, you can get this garbage out of here. But we can't have two different standards for different grades, right? So why not eliminate the garbage? It's just mind-blowing what they're doing to this country, y'all. It is mind-blowing. They must also show they understand bias in themselves and their students related to race, sexual orientation, gender identity, and other cultural Marxist categories. Now, as you could probably tell, this is from the Federalist, and this is a right-leaning news publication. So, of course, they're going to outright tell you, because it is Marxist, but this is a biased news article. And, yeah, but the facts are all there. And that's what I'm here for, the facts, right? Like, I might push back on some of these points. Calling it Marxist is very, very fair. It's very, very fair. As a matter of fact, they are quite fair in this article. I've read the entire thing. I've researched. I looked into some of this. I checked the sources. And yes, this is all real. And they are not misleading you in any sort of manner as far as my research can tell me. It's just insane, y'all. Some Christian universities in the state will obey these regulations, said Doug Seaton, founder and president of the nonprofit Upper Midwest Law Center located in Minneapolis. Some Christian universities will not, but so far those UMLC has reached out to that plan to disobey these state commands to violate their faith will do so quietly and only sue when the state finds and punishes them, Seaton said, which once again exemplifies conservative Christians, as a matter of fact, as being just tolerant of all kinds of garbage, right? Like they're just leave me alone type of people, and if you come messing with us, okay, now we'll fight back. But until that's kind of the wrong approach, because what they're doing with that, they know this. These people that are implementing this garbage, they know this, so they're just pushing it on you and pushing it on you and pushing it on you, right? This violates the First Amendment. People's freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and all this garbage, right? None of this is necessary to the higher learning functions of what a school and education system is supposed to be. So this is their plan. They're pushing the communism forward, y'all. And we've got to do something to stop it. We need to get more activists out there to fight against this. We need to make the people aware, right? COVID, that was one of the good things that COVID did. COVID opened many people's eyes as to what's going on in our school system. But do you think it stopped, folks? No. It hasn't stopped. It's continued, and it's still continuing, and they're still trying to pull this garbage off to the side, to where we don't see it. They're trying to indoctrinate our kids with Marxist cultural ideology. That's what it is. That's all this is Marxist ideology. Some are not willing to do it, file a lawsuit, until they actually have their college program tagged for non-compliance, or their graduates actually not licensed as a consequence of not adhering to these standards, he said in a phone interview. This comes even though UMLC, as a public interest law firm, would undertake the litigation and pay the vast majority of its expenses thanks to their donors. 3 Minnesota Christian universities the Federalists reached out to did not return inquiries on whether they would enforce the new licensing rules. Faithful members of the world's largest and oldest religions cannot, in good conscience, affirm non-heterosexual orientations and gender identities. Christians who do so publicly deny their faith, something Jesus Christ said endangers a person's soul and eternal bliss after death. This is true. This is all in the Bible, by the way. Therefore, whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. This is directly from the Bible, as a matter of fact. But whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. Matthew 10:32 33. Minnesota's teacher requirements therefore force Christians, Muslims, Jews, and adherents to other religions to violate their faith and endanger their hopes of eternal life in order to work in a government-run school, right? Once again, this is government pretty much forcing you out, or forcing speech on you, forcing expression on you. This is a violation of the First Amendment. But as we've covered several times in the past, the Biden administration has no problems whatsoever with violating the First Amendment. They have no problems whatsoever violating the Second Amendment. And they probably have no problems whatsoever violating every other amendment in the Constitution, because they probably have already done so. Forcing people to testify to beliefs they don't hold, often called compelled speech, is clearly unconstitutional, he said. They're essentially requiring people to affirm these ideas that they don't really believe, in many cases, as a condition of being a public school teacher or being part of a program to be a licensed public school teacher. You can't force that kind of speech. You can't require adherence to ideas that aren't believed. Yes, this is basic principles of a free society, y'all. Basic principles of a free society, and I couldn't agree more with that. This must be fought and must be struck down any and everywhere it's tried to be implemented, right? These people are insane. They're trying to push their religion on everybody. And once again, I will reaffirm to everybody that this is most definitely a religion. Just look into it, right? I'll cover it. If you guys request me to make a video talking about and explaining exactly how this Marxist garbage is a religion, I will do so. But leave a comment down below. The 13-member board that made these changes is appointed by the governor, whom, for at least this last 6 years, has been Walz. So Walz is poised to make similar bigoted, totalitarian, and unconstitutional policies across the United States should he be elected vice president. I would have to say to that, good luck, buddy. Good freaking luck, because you're going to get a lot more pushback on a national level, because you might be able to do this in progressive Minnesota, but I can guarantee you, you're not going to be able to do this in deep red Louisiana. I can promise you that. Or deep red Alabama, or deep red Florida, or deep red Texas, or deep red Missouri, West Virginia, blah, 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 Idaho, Montana. You get it. You get it. As a matter of fact, I would compel you to try. Go right ahead and try and just see how fast you get sued into oblivion. As I reported last year, Minnesota's new teacher requirements also require teachers to agree that the taxpayers supplying their salaries and the people who created the school systems that will employ them are racist and affirm other cultural Marxist beliefs. For example, Standard C6 or 6C, requires that the teacher understands the historical foundations of education in Minnesota. Innocuous, right? That have and continue to create inequitable opportunities, experiences, and outcomes for learners. Now let's pause right there. That's an obvious statement, right? Because everybody's created unequal. Everybody's created equal, but everybody doesn't end up on equal terms, right? There's this tiny little thing called free will, that we have the free will to make decisions for ourselves, right? Pretty much destroying equity, because that's equality of outcome. You're never going to have equality of outcome, right? Me and you could go up to the same machine, right? One of those machines where you put a couple of quarters in, or you scan a card or something, and there's a little joystick. One of those machines with the arm that comes down and grabs something, picks it up, and, the machine. Now, I could go up to that and operate the damn thing and never get anything out of it, no matter how much I try. And you could come up to that machine and, with the very first try, zip over there, grab something, pick it up, and you won a prize, folks. And I didn't win anything, even though I put, significantly more work into trying to get a prize from the machine. That's called reality, right? That's what teaching a class of 20, 30 students, right? Everybody's not going to soak up the same information in the same way. These people are trying to force equity. They're trying to force outcomes on everybody. That's an impossibility. Just an outright impossibility. You will never do that, ever. I don't care how much of an equal opportunity you start people out with, you're always going to have different outcomes. And not even less or more outcomes, right? Like, or, better or lesser outcomes, I should say. But just different outcomes. Because people have free will. Free will destroys these Marxist ideas outright. Especially for students historically denied access, underserved, or underrepresented on the basis of race, gender, sexual orientation. That standard remains in the latest version of the regulations under the same number. That's just outright insanity. Recently in the Wall Street Journal, Catherine Kirsten examined curricular changes Minnesota is making under Wall's administration in ethics studies that mirror these changes to teacher licensing requirements. Mr. Wall signed the law establishing this initiative in 2023. The department's standards and benchmarks approved in January require first graders to identify examples of ethnicity, equality, liberation, and systems of power, and those examples to construct meanings for those terms. Meanings for those terms. Like a first grader. A first grader. That's insane. That is outright insane. Why are we trying to teach this? What good could come from teaching a student about systems of power? That's insane. They're going to learn about this. The right systems of power exist, right? But I'm not trying to say one is greater than the other, because there's always inequities everywhere. You can't get away from that. Trying to force these kids to view one system of power as inequitable and better or lesser over another one is just insane to me at a first grader level. Fourth graders must identify the processes and impacts of colonization and examine how discrimination and the oppression of various racial and ethnic groups have produced resistance movements. What? Like, why? Why do fourth graders need to know about that? Right? Why do they need to know the intricacies of colonization, for crying out loud? And is it a bad thing? Right? Like they're trying to teach us that colonization is a bad thing. Because, racial inequities. Because as colonizers, we came over here and displaced the indigenous peoples, right? Like, I hate that term. I can't stand how they call Indians indigenous people, right? Because it's a lie. It's all a lie. Indigenous people, there are no indigenous people to the Western Hemisphere. Right? We all come from Africa. That's where we all reside from, right? Like, originally, scientifically proven, we all came from Central Africa. So, we're all not indigenous peoples. We're all colonizers from somewhere. It's insane. But they're not going to teach a fourth grader that. But it gets even worse, folks. It gets much worse. High school students are told to develop an analysis of racial capitalism. Why? And anti-blackness. That's racist. That's outright racist, and it is illegal, as a matter of fact. Not should be. It is illegal under the 1965 Civil Rights Act. And are taught to view themselves as members of racialized hierarchies and based on dominant European beauty standards. That's just insane. And it's not true. Right? It's just not true. Not true at all. Not no more. Maybe back in the 1700s. Yeah, for sure. Maybe back then, but not no more, folks. Especially since 1965, since the Civil Rights Act. The new teacher requirements are also rife with demands to agree with race Marxism, as Child Protection League analyses detail. Below are just a few examples. Now, I didn't get into all that because I didn't want to run really freaking long. I tried to ram through that to get through this in a decent amount of time. But this is just all insanity. These people, they're trying to indoctrinate kids. That's what they're doing, right? Like, the first time I heard people talking about this, I'm like, come on, man, get off your high horse. Indoctrinate kids. What are you talking about? And then we see this garbage coming out of Minnesota. But Minnesota's not the only ones doing this, folks. Like New York, California, Oregon, Washington. They're all trying to push these progressive ideas and indoctrinate these kids at a young age to grow up to think that colonization is evil and that just because they're white, that they're some sort of bad, evil person because their ancestors did a bad thing. That's insane to me, right? Trying to teach them about structures of power, systems of power, hierarchies, and all this other garbage, right? Like, we understand hierarchies. We know they exist. There's nothing wrong with hierarchies, for crying out loud. It's what is done within those hierarchies that becomes evil or not. The hierarchical system itself is not bad, right? I mean, that's just how life works. When you're a kid, you get told what to do by your parents. That's a hierarchy, folks. There are genetic hierarchies, as a matter of fact, right? You have alpha males, right? There's always going to be somebody who's a little bit more aggressive than somebody else. So there's always going to be hierarchies. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but they try to teach you it's a bad thing. Why? Why not teach these people how to navigate these hierarchical structures? Teach them how to navigate. Teach them how to reach the top of those hierarchies. Right? Like, what happened to teaching our kids that, to discard social norms and be what you want to be, that you are in control of your future. You drive your own destiny. You are the one that makes the decisions that's going to impact the rest of your life. How and when did we get away from trying to tell our kids that they can be and do anything they want to as long as they put their mind to it, to teaching them that they're evil because how they were born, something they had no control over, right? These people believe that there is no free will out there, that this is a deterministical universe, for crying out loud. It's all insanity, if you ask me. And I don't believe it whatsoever. I had a discussion the other day with a coworker who believes this garbage. And man, I was breaking him down. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back or look like an arrogant prick or anything, but I really was. Like, I humbly say that I was breaking his arguments down. Yeah, sure, he's a young kid. He's 20 years old. He's an adult, but he's still a young kid. But he come in here with all these ideas, and I was just breaking them down, knocking them down. Right, so we got into the free will and determinism conceptual conversation. And, he believes that everything is deterministic. He's like, yeah, if you get out there and you go and you get into a wreck, there was nothing you could do to change that. I said, lies. Outright lies. That's not true. No, man, you can't say. Yes, I can, because you could have chose not to go to the store at that time. The other person could have chose not to leave when they did. Maybe they thought, hey, hang on, I'm going to go pee, and then y'all would have never interacted whatsoever. You absolutely have free will. Some things are semi-deterministic, sure, like waking up in the morning, getting hungry, yeah, things like that, getting old and dying. That's deterministic. Sure, it's a blend of free will, but we have the free will by God. You right now, sitting there, you can go outside or go into a field and sit there until you pass on to the great beyond, right? You don't have to do anything else besides that. Oh, it's determined for sure that you're going to breathe until you stop breathing, but you can absolutely go and do that if you want to. If you put your mind to it, if you have enough willpower to starve yourself, you can absolutely do it. That's a possibility. Nothing is determined, right? Like outright 100%, except for death. That's always a determined outcome. But when that's going to happen, Nobody knows. It's up to your free will to make it a long time from now or not. You choose to go and get into that car and go wherever you go and get into that car wreck. That was a choice. That was a free will choice. You didn't have to do that. You could have stayed home. And I broke him down, and he finally kind of agreed with me on that. And then now I didn't totally change his mind about this, but it's things like that. These people are trying to indoctrinate our kids, and I find it just insane that they're doing this. Why are they trying to push these ideas on our kids? Why? School is supposed to be for basic learning, right? Preparing these kids for a life in society. These things should be taught maybe starting in high school, right? About some of these things, but not all of these things. Like all this garbage with race. Like, since when did we start trying to teach our kids that because your skin color is different, because your ethnicity is different, that means you're better or worse than somebody else? Personally, I think that shouldn't be a non-factor whatsoever. Ethnicity doesn't matter at all when it comes to basic learning stuff, right? Ethnicity doesn't really matter whatsoever to me, right? If you're black, white, green, brown, skin color doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It bears no impact on anything, if you ask me, or it shouldn't. I'll put it that way. It shouldn't have any impact on any aspect in your life or anybody's life at all anymore. Since the Civil Rights Act, it should bear no responsibility on the outcome of, whatever you're into, whatever you're doing. Getting a job, going to school, living your life, buying a house, going to the movies. You get it. And it boggles my mind as to why we're teaching our kids these things, especially at such a young age. But I know I've went long. I told you I was going to go long on this one, y'all. But I think I've rambled on for long enough. Y'all let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. Hey, look, I promise my next video will be a little bit shorter. I promise you that. Coming out at 7 in the morning. So y'all tune in. Y'all turn it on. Y'all hit that like button for me if you don't mind. And y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.